Well, John, thank you for joining us today. Everyone else, thanks for hopping on the call. We've got a special guest, John Murphy from Cost Segregation Services.
Awesome. Thanks, Hunter. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I don't know if Craig's going to jump on or not, so we'll kind of go ahead and get started. And if he jumps on late, then great. John, tell everybody a little bit about your background, because you offer me a ton of value, and my clients, people I connect you with. So tell everybody a little bit about your background, what you do.
Yeah, so I've got a corporate background for the kind of first half of my life, and then got the entrepreneurial bug about halfway through and got my real estate license. I don't know if all these guys on here are licensed real estate people as well, but obviously real estate investors. So that was back in 2003, then got my broker's license in '07. Sold residential real estate, thought I'd open my own brokerage, and then of course all hell broke loose in 2008 with the crash. And people kept saying, "Don't open your own brokerage." So I didn't. So I just continued to keep my license. Sold a number of houses in Minneapolis area, and then moved to Greenville, South Carolina, back in 2019, and came down here. And there was about 4,500 realtors down here. I just didn't really want to mess with it. I had been doing some cost segregation at that time, and just decided to go at it full time. So I came down here, and there was really not anybody doing it. And as I call people across the country, a lot of people are not very familiar with it. I do find sometimes the real estate investment community probably is more familiar with it than sometimes the guys who own big commercial property. So it's kind of interesting, but it's a fantastic service, and it's a lot of fun to be able to save people money. I mean, whether it's 5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand, 100 grand, whatever, it's your money, right? So why are you sending it off the IRS if it can stay in your bank account?
Yeah.
So I love it. So I do it full time, and I work from Greenville, South Carolina, but I work all over the country, and I work with real estate investors as well as commercial property owners, CPAs, commercial brokers, realtors, etc.
Yeah, that's great. John, I really do appreciate that you're also local to me in my market, right? You're
Yeah, that's kind of nice. It's nice we can go grab a bite to eat or something once in a while. So instead of just doing Zooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we got at least one, maybe two agents, brokers on here. Everybody else, including myself, as a fellow investor. So, we tend to wear multiple hats. But
Yep.
if somebody's never really heard of cost segregation, or maybe they've heard a headline here or there, why would it be impactful for them in their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things I also tell people, I'm not a CPA, so I can't give you I'm not going to give you tax advice, right? I'm just going to tell you what our services are. Then you need to consult with your own tax advisor to make sure it works for you. But a couple things to think about. If you're owning investment property and you plan to hold it for a while, probably at least 3 years to make it worth the study fees to do this thing. But what we do is we take a property, if it's a multifamily property, or maybe it's a duplex, or it's a single family rental, right? That's a 27 and a half year asset. So when you guys buy those properties, part of the benefit, of course, is you get a depreciation expense, you get a deduction. Besides all your other expenses and costs and loan costs and all that stuff, you also get a depreciation expense. And that equates to about 3.6% every year you get a depreciation expense. And for a lot of investors, if they own maybe one or two properties or they're not a full-time real estate professional, that regular depreciation, straight line depreciation might be enough to help offset any tax liability you might have. So, but if you're starting to accumulate properties and you're becoming profitable, or if you're also investing and you're a real estate professional, you can use the depreciation to offset your real estate income. So, say commission sales that you might have, or if you're a full-time investor and you've got a number of properties and you're profitable, you might want some bigger deductions, and that's what this does. So we go in and we identify, we reclassify basically everything in the property, in the house, all the systems, all the components, things like, the appliances, the flooring, the window treatments, lighting, plumbing. There might be specialty plumbing, specialty electrical, all the electrical, the outside, the land improvements, all of that. So we reclassify all of that. And why every 100% bonus depreciation for property that is 20 years or less. So when you guys own rental real estate inside those properties, inside those houses or multi you might have, you've got probably, might be 15 or 20% of the property might be 5 year class life property. You might have another couple percent, maybe to 5 or 6%. If it's got a big parking lot, it might be 10%. That could be considered land improvements. If you've got swimming pools, those are fantastic. Gigantic patios, those kinds of things. So we identify all of that, give you a report, and so that you get a much bigger depreciation earlier on in the life of the ownership. So it's kind of the time value of money. If you can use the depreciation, if it's beneficial to you that you don't have to write a check to the IRS for 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever it is, rather that you might spend a couple grand on a cost segregation study, then that's a good trade if you're going to keep that property. And sometimes people will say, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to hang on to this or not, right? Then it's really your call. If you don't want to spend the, two or three thousand bucks or whatever it's going to cost to do some of these studies, don't do it. We're not going to force your hand on that. We're just going to basically arm you with the information. So we will run there's no cost, no obligation. We'll run an estimate for you. It'll give you a range of what you can expect. And Hunter, I think you found that to be pretty accurate, right? We kind of give you barbells, right? Kind of a low end estimate and a higher end estimate. It typically falls somewhere in between. Doesn't mean it can't go higher, and occasionally they go lower, but we're usually pretty good about that. But that way you can make a simple decision. You could say, hey, okay, these guys think they can deliver $30,000 in increased depreciation for me this year, increased accumulated depreciation. Let's just say it's a 32% tax rate. That's like $10,000 in federal tax savings. If the study cost you, $2,300, the net cost to you really is like 1,500. You can do the math, right? Costs you really 1,500 bucks to save 10 grand on your taxes. That's a pretty good deal.
Not a bad ROI at all.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, if you could do that on all your properties, get a 6 or 7 times return all the time, that would be awesome. And the bigger the properties you own, the return's even bigger, right? It just scales up. Cost of the studies don't go up, but your benefit goes way up.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Oh, sorry,
I was
John.
just going to say, well, to clarify, the study price does go up, but it doesn't go up, the same amount, right? So you might end up with a couple $1 million multifamily property. It's not going to cost you 20 grand to do that study. Okay. Be a fraction of that.
Yeah.
John, I appreciate you jumping on. I'm a big fan of cost segregation. It's something
Awesome.
that I pitch all the time with my clients. I totally believe in it. I love the concept. Since we got you on the call, can you share any? And I know it's still fairly new, but the whole 100% bonus depreciation that I saw that just hit it was passed by Congress. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so the House passed it, Senate hasn't. We're not, they're going to still argue and try to get this thing figured out, but we're pretty confident that 100% bonus depreciation will come back. It'll be effective January 20th of 2025. So anybody who put a building into service, and effectively the inauguration day, can get 100% bonus depreciation. What we hear that's going to just lock in for the next 4 years. So, which would be nice because right now we're in the middle of kind of the stair step down, right? So 100% bonus depreciation. And just to clarify for people, so with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, so after September 27th, 2017 through December 31st, 2022, if you have a building you put into service and have not yet done cost segregation on it, you can still get 100% bonus depreciation on those buildings, even though we're now 3 years past that. If you put a building into service in 23, it becomes 80%, 24, 60%, 25. It's currently 40%. So we're still doing studies right now today. The owners realize that they've bought buildings. They just know it's just going to depend on, it doesn't matter when they do the study, it's when they file their taxes. And as Congress made the rule retroactive back to January 20th. So most of those guys are going to see the benefit of 100% bonus depreciation. And the nice thing is you get your money back a lot faster, right? It's kind of, I joke a little bit about it's kind of crack cocaine, especially for some of these commercial real estate investors in particular, right? Or the big multifamily guys. They love this stuff, right? Because it's such a huge hit that comes back to them. The fact of the matter is, we were busy even before bonus depreciation. So I mean, think about it. You're buying property, you're going to hold it. You would much rather be able to accelerate property even at 5 years and 15 years rather than 27 and a half years or 39 years on the commercial end. So you would just get a little bit bigger depreciation every year when you do cost segregation. But now with the bonus depreciation situation, it's a giant hit, right? And not everybody can use it. So we always like to make sure we're clear on that, right? If somebody bought a couple $1 million building and all of a sudden they're going to get $400,000 or $500,000 depreciation expense, their accountant might say you can't use this, right? It's just way too much. The fact of the matter is, if they're profitable, that will just sit as a net loss carry forward, right? So they would just chew into that, each successive year until that loss is gone. So, and I always advise people just to say, Talk with your tax advisor. But if you're buying property, you think you're going to hold it, you think cost segregation makes sense. It's best to try to do it in the first year that you put that into service, so you don't have to deal with the additional cost of the 3115. So 3115 is a change of accounting form that just lets the IRS know that you're going from straight line depreciation to accelerated depreciation. And that needs to get filed. And there's a cost to do that, right? That's going to cost you probably another $1,000, $2,000 per study. So best just to do that, get the study done the first year that you put it into service. Hunter, is that me messing up the screen?
Uh,
No, there we go.
Seems
All
fine.
right.
But no, this is all super helpful. I mean, I'm just kind of thinking back, John, to a project that I was working on end of last year. A lot of what I do is in the creative finance space, but I bought a property sub two, and because we bought it sub two, we go on title. And because we're able to go on title, we can now claim some of those benefits. And I can't remember the exact dollar amount that we paid to actually acquire the property, but we got significantly more tax benefits out, even at 60% bonus depreciation, which I thought was fantastic. So,
Right, right. And you guys just remember recapture tax. Nima, I'm assuming you're probably real familiar with recapture tax and the liability that you have, when you're doing cost segregation. The one thing that the IRS says is that, when you guys do cost segregation, you're getting the benefit at basically your marginal tax rate. So whatever that is, right? It's your savings that if you're at 24% or 32%, 37, whatever, you're getting the benefit at your marginal rate. So when you sell the building and you have to pay recapture tax back, you pay the recapture tax back at your marginal rate. So if you happen to have had a giant year or you sold some property, you got these huge capital gains, so now your income's, five, six, 700,000, whatever, it's some giant number, and you're at 37% federal return, you're going to pay recapture tax back at 37%. If you don't do cost segregation and you don't do any kind of accelerated depreciation, just do straight line, the federal recapture tax rate is 25%. So there may be a delta there that you just have to calculate when you're selling. And the other thing is too is you still legal to do 1031 exchanges, so you might just decide to push it all into a 1031 exchange. So you keep that in mind.
yeah.
That's super helpful, John. Thank you. I'm like nerding out over what you're saying.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Um, the other thing too, just to keep in mind, just you guys are talking to people because you might be talking to people who inherit property, or maybe a spouse dies or something like that. They get a step up in basis. Um, I was working on one. It was kind of an amazing story. It was somebody that owned a mobile home park. I don't know if any of you guys do mobile home parks or not, or RV parks, but those are phenomenal for cost segregation. But these guys had owned a property for 20 years, and unfortunately, one of the spouses had died, and so the surviving spouse got to step up in basis, and they had the appraisal done. It was a giant number what the property was worth now, and they got to take depreciation expense on basically 50% of the value of that because they got the step up in basis. So it's kind of amazing because they've been depreciating the property over 20 years, massive cash flow. Now, unfortunately, a spouse dies, one of the owners dies, and they get a step up in basis. And the CPA was smart enough to look around, try to figure out, hey, how do you do this? And contacted us to get that done.
Yeah, super, super unique. But I love that, just being able to be creative and figure out ways to take advantage of either the properties that you currently own or the ones that you're going to be buying. So,
Hunter, do any of you guys here are you doing big value add kinds of projects? Or are they smaller value add? Just the reason because I want to get into partial asset disposition and make sure these guys understand that a little bit.
yeah. I'm not doing any of that, but Randy, y'all doing any of that?
No.
Okay,
I,
so
I, I currently have a client that I helped in the central coast of California acquire an 8 unit multifamily building. This is definitely a value add situation. He's probably going to have to put somewhere in the ballpark of 130 to $200,000 into
yeah,
the property. He's currently going through that process right now. We've worked on a few vendors, and I would love to just pick your brain because I've talked to him about cost segregation before. We haven't gotten to that point, but yeah, how he can maximize his net.
yeah. So one of the things to think about when you're going in, when you got a property and you are, um, let's say you buy a property and it's completely vacant. It's kind of a dead property. You guys bring it back to life. That's different. You guys are coming in, you got to spend a couple hundred grand to get that thing going. But I know a lot of what you're buying is an existing property. It's already ongoing. They've got tenants in there. You're moving them out kind of one at a time and rehabbing the unit. You might be doing some, depending on the building. If you said that's an 8 unit, that's probably not that big, but there might be bigger buildings where there's some common area that they're working on. Maybe there's some outdoor stuff they're tearing out, putting in some new stuff. When you bought the property, just realize you've got cost basis that you bought, and all of a sudden you're tearing it out of the building, throwing it in a landfill, right? And that's got value that was on your books or your client's books. What we do, and it typically has to be, it's probably got to be $100,000 in renovations to make sense to do this, just because the fee is going to be 2 or 3 thousand bucks to do something like that. But we'll go in and calculate what you guys throw out of the building. So that's an additional deduction potentially for the owner, again, if they need it. If they're running a really skinny budget and they're like, we don't really care, we can't take advantage of it, we don't want to pay $3,000 to do this, we don't care about leaving the basis on our books. But if it's big enough or they're making enough money, they should study it because then we'll calculate what they threw out. So they get a deduction that year, it gets off their books, so it lowers their basis. They don't have to end up paying recapture tax on stuff that's in the landfill. So it's a double win, but it has to be done in the tax year in which the work was done. So if property is being renovated in 2025, that has to be applied to their 25 tax returns. So they still have lots of time to get that done. But if somebody did work in 2024 and they've already filed their tax return for 2024, that's already dead and gone. You can't even amend to get partial asset disposition. So as the properties get bigger, it's definitely something that you should be thinking about. If you got some bigger clients that are doing some pretty significant renovations, it's something to at least have a conversation about. We'll just run the numbers and show what it looks like. We'll show you, hey, here's what we think the guy could save on his taxes by doing this. Here's the fee. He can talk with his tax guy. If they think it's worth it, great. If not, no big deal. But that is a great tax deduction that I would just tell you almost everybody misses, including the big commercial guys. They're just not aware of it. A lot of CPAs I talk to, they're not really aware of it either because they don't know how to calculate it.
Yeah, and a lot of folks that I had chatted with previously mentioned that you couldn't be able to use cost segregation on the single family detached dwelling. And at the beginning of this call, you had mentioned that that's also a thing. And I think about my father. He recently did a 1031 tax exchange from a single family dwelling into a 4 unit building, a small loan on it.
Yep.
He had a great run with his equity, and he took like $150,000 loan on this property. And I'm just trying to think right now if it makes sense for him to do a cost segregation study, given the
Great,
small amount.
great point. So let's chat about that. So when you do a 1031 exchange, effectively, the CPAs have to calculate what's the carryover basis in the new property for us to be able to figure it out. You can't take bonus depreciation on carryover basis. We can calculate it so they could get accelerated depreciation, so there may still be something there. At about 150, 175,000 is about as skinny as it's going to make sense to do, but it's something to at least look at because again, if he's profitable, right, our fee's not going to be that high. You guys it's just the math, right? It's like Hunter, same thing on some of your properties. It's like the math is the math. Okay, here's the fee, here's the potential savings. Does it make sense to do this or not? Um, Sometimes people bring 1031 money into a deal. They pay for the whole new deal with 1031 money. A lot of times there's not going to be enough stuff there, not enough basis there for us to study. But at least we can have a conversation about it, right? Because he's making money in that building, on the new building. He's making money on it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
he
yeah, we
is.
do a lot of single family, right? Hunter, I think. Well, one was a duplex, another one was a single family.
Yeah, but I've got two more single family for you to study sometime this.
Yeah. So we study single families all the time. Yeah, and a lot of people have a misunderstanding of it's got to be, a half a million, $1 million building. It does not. Um, Nima, you're in California, so everything is super expensive, but your land values are
Yeah.
crazy, right? Your land values are
Yeah.
really extraordinary, which is not helpful for the owner necessarily in terms of
Yeah.
depreciation.
If I've owned a property that used to be my primary residence, and in fact, I'm going through the moving process right now, I'm relocating to a different area within the same state, that initial property is going to be a rental. And now, as we're chatting here, I'm wondering what tax opportunities I may have for that.
Yep. Good question. So what happens there is, yes, you can do it. You can do cost segregation on it, but it's on your basis. So if you bought it a long time ago and you have a really low basis, just realize it's going to be whatever the basis is that you paid for it and improvements that
Mm.
you had made along the way, and then it's going to go into service, let's say September 1st, 2025. So you'd have an in-service date from your rental standpoint sometime this year, let's say, but the basis might be from 7 or 8 years ago when you purchased the building, purchased the property. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
But we don't. I did one of those for a developer here in Greenville who did exactly that. It was his first home for his family, and he just turned it into a rental property. And it was a couple hundred thousand
Yes.
dollars basis. It wasn't huge, but he was like, "Hey, it's still some savings."
Wow. Okay.
And then as you get, as the properties get bigger, one of the things that guys in the commercial world like about having these cost seg studies is they've got a cost report and they've got all the detail that's in the building. So if they are doing significant renovations or have to tear stuff out or do big repairs, they know what was on their books. So it's going to be helpful for them to dispose of what's on their books. So sometimes they won't need to call us or have us do the work. They can just do the work on their own once they have that study.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. How do you feel like people who are maybe smaller, maybe not these huge commercial guys yet, but somebody's they got a single family or they've got a 4 unit, and they're trying to scale up their portfolio. John, what do you feel like is the best way to kind of work this in, to what they might already be doing?
Well, a couple things. Let's think about somebody who's got maybe let's say a $250,000 rental house, right? And maybe the land is worth 50,000. I don't know. Maybe you guys would be more aggressive than that, but 200,000, he's going to get 3.6% each year. He's going to get $7,200 each year just in straight line depreciation on that 200,000 cost basis house, right? In the first year, it's prorated, right? So it's prorated how many the months that you own that, but then year two, he's going to get $7,200 a month every year. So, so for me, as I look at it, as I talk to someone, they say, "Hey, well, I'm netting $500 a month my rental property." I'm like, "Okay, that's awesome. So you're netting $6,000. Is that before you've taken the depreciation expense or not?" And a lot of times I talk to investors, they're not really sure, right? They're just like, someone else is doing their books or whatever. But in that situation, $500 a month sounds pretty good. But you know what? His regular depreciation is going to wipe out that income anyway. So he doesn't need us. See what I'm saying? So he's going to have multiples of those. Um, and that's just the math. It's like, hey, and Hunter, I know you know your numbers really well. So hey, at the end of the year, here's my pro forma. Here's where I think I'm going to end up on my income on this property. And then you can make the decision. Oh yeah, I'm making enough money on this deal. I am going to have to write a check to the IRS based on this income. It probably to look at doing cost segregation. And that's really as simple as that. If you're starting to make $1,000, $2,000, 3,000 net, or you're writing a check to the IRS for $1,000 or $2,000 every year, you probably should look at doing a cost seg study on at least one of your buildings. That's probably really the simple math.
Yeah. And I really do like that because I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't qualify as real estate professionals. So,
Yeah,
you or me, or, they wouldn't be allowed to move the income from the passive side over to the active side, or, the losses thereof.
correct. Yep. So the depreciation that we would generate stays on the passive side. So the guy might have a $200,000 a year W-2 and he's starting to buy some real estate on the side and he's only making a few dollars on his real estate on his long-term rental properties, but he generates a $50,000 depreciation expense. He can't use that to offset his W-2 income. It stays on the passive side. So it would stay as a loss carry forward.
Going to be a good number of years for he can probably burn through all that.
Probably. And the other thing too is you don't lose it. So just FYI, sometimes people go, oh, well, um, if I generate this and I create a loss carry forward, thinking that maybe they're going to go buy more property so they can use it. Something happens, they don't, so they still have this loss carry forward, and they eventually sell the property. It does get calculated in the sale, so it would lower your capital gains on the property because you have this loss carry forward. So you don't lose it. You don't ever lose the loss if you generate it with the cost segregation, just FYI. And that's by the way for maybe another time, and I'm not necessarily the person to talk on this. I know we've done some digging, and Hunter, I can't remember if it was you and I were talking about this at lunch one day, but how utilizing a loss like that could help offset some capital gains.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that too in depth, but that is a really good point to certainly consider and think about.
Yeah, check with your tax advisor. That's all I got to say. And then in terms of some people ask, well, how complicated is this? What do I have to do? What do you need from us? All those kinds of things. So a couple of things. We send somebody to your property, so we've got a third party that's verified that the property is indeed at 123 Main Street, and this is what it looks like, and this is what it looked like on May 27th or whenever we took the pictures. So we have that kind of documentation, which is helpful in case people are trying to do fraudulent stuff, giving us pictures of a property that doesn't really exist, gets bigger results than maybe what they should. So either one of our reps will go, or we've got an outside firm that'll take the pictures. But we'll typically ask you for your depreciation schedule if you've had it in service for one tax year already, settlement statement, appraisal if you have it. I know, Hunter, a lot of times you're buying properties, there may not be an appraisal involved. That's fine. We can still do the study without it. But any documents that you guys might have is helpful. If you've got surveys of the property, that's helpful too. But then we take all of our pictures, and then our engineering team takes a look at it, and they typically get studies done in about 3 weeks. So it gets turned pretty quickly.
Yeah, the one thing that I always struggle with, John, you always ask me for an appraisal, and I
Yeah,
really never have it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's fine. They can figure it out. It's helpful to have, and we just like going through this too because maybe there's something the appraiser picks up that we're not aware of. So, and they're nice to have, but yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Don't fret if you don't have it.
One of the strategies I really like utilizing, because I'm full time in the real estate sales brokerage side of it, and so for me, if I sell enough properties, I have a certain amount of income, and then I can buy one or two properties a year. I cost seg those, and then even if I can't write off the majority, I can typically lower my active income.
Yep,
So it's been a really
yep.
for me. Uh,
Yeah, no, that's a great strategy, Hunter. I mean, some people, when I talk to owners, like, how much do you want to pay in tax, and almost everybody says none. And it's like, and then you talk to CPAs, like, well, it's not really doesn't have to be that way. But sometimes if you just can knock down a peg or two on your marginal rate, that's a huge help, right? Like if you can go from 32 to 24, that's 8 points. That's a big deal. Save you a bunch of money.
Yeah, and if you can just stack a couple properties in one year, like one of my strategies, which is kind of an interesting one right now, is to make an offer where I am basically seller financing something at a high purchase price so that it benefits me on the depreciation side of it, but my payment is enough that I still cash flow. So I'm almost quote overpaying for the property to get the tax benefits,
Okay.
but seller financing with great terms, payments. So I'm still cash flow and still making money, but
Yeah.
able to, effectively get a good property at a, okay price. Maybe it's closer to retail that I'd like, but
Yeah. Got it. Got it. But it benefits you the way you've structured it. So
and that's all what we're looking for as investors is, what benefits does this property have that another one doesn't? Some cases it's tax benefits or cost segregation or cash flow, or maybe it's a multiple of them.
yeah. Yeah. And if you guys are buying multifamily, duplexes, quads, eightplexes, 16s, whatever they are, if they have parking, parking is very valuable for you guys for tax benefits. So if they've got off-site parking on your property, those are super helpful to have in terms of cost segregation. They'll give you nice additional benefits because it's 15-year class life.
That's great.
And the thing too, I just tell you, if you guys are representing clients, Hunter, I know you know this, you guys are trying to put a deal together, you certainly can reach out. We're happy to run numbers for you so that you can have that on hand, have that as part of your pro forma in case it can help put the deal together for you. We're happy to do that. So there's not going to be a charge. Just, typically give us a day or two to get it turned around, kicked back to you. But we typically just need an address, the price it looks like what you're going to pay for it. If you guys have an opinion of the land value, otherwise we'll take a crack at that and when it's going to go into service, and then we can run the numbers. Just let us know what the building is. Hey, it's a fourplex. It's 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 4 units, all identical, whatever. We'll then we'll then give you the numbers back.
Awesome. Well, I want to take a second, John, and kind of just open up the floor, see if there's any, pressing questions somebody might,
Yeah,
happy to kind of dive into that. Otherwise, John, you and I can maybe riff on a couple things for a minute. So,
no problem.
anyone have any questions for John? Anything we can touch on from a cost segregation standpoint? Cool. Well, John, as far as, certain types of properties, what do you feel like it, let's say somebody has $1 million budget, maybe it's not $1 million in cash, but let's say they can purchase,
Right.
whether that's, cash, 1031, whatever. What do you think the best property like asset type is going to be for them to get the best kind of return on their investment from a tax, cost?
For most of those guys at about $1 million, it's probably an RV park. So those things are phenomenal. So one of the things we'll just explain in an RV park. So let's just take an example. Let's say you buy an RV park, mobile home RV park. The mobile homes units that you guys buy typically don't have a lot of value. They're kind of old, very run down. They might have a value somewhere between 5 and 15,000. If they still have the tongue on them, they're still on wheels. They're considered personal property. So a lot of that's going to be considered 5-year class life property anyway. So normally that just gets backed out. So we back out whatever units you have on the land. But let's just say a typical mobile home park or RV park at 1.1 million, let's just say 100 grand for the land and $1 million in your cost basis. Maybe you got 100 grand in trailers on there that are yours. So let's back that out as well. Now you got 900,000. And if you get 900,000, let's say we identify just even 60%, um, it's a $540,000 tax deduction year one if bonus depreciation is 100%. So Hunter, I don't know if you can still hear me or not, but a lot of times those mobile home and RV parks that we'll see somewhere between 60 and 80, maybe 90% of the cost basis gets identified as 5 and 15 year class life. So they're gigantic deductions. Um,
That's that's just crazy. So in theory, let's say somebody has, quarter of a mil to put down on
yep.
this, they're going to buy $1 million property. You're saying, depending upon the right one, they could get anywhere between eight or $900,000 write off.
Yeah. 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 Especially as bonus comes back to 100%. Yeah, that's what it'll be. I mean, I can't tell you how many mobile home parks I've done that are million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, and the tax deductions are just gigantic, right? So 2 million, 2.5 million, massive deductions that consume all of their income and then some. And some of these guys own multiple parks, so they're sophisticated and they know what they're doing. But yeah, that is a giant tax deduction. So those really are great. If anybody wants to get into tunnel car washes, those are all also considered 15-year class life. So that's kind of a classic, Hunter, especially where we live. A lot of people complain about all the tunnel car washes that are going up everywhere. A lot of dental offices too, but a lot of car washes. And the car washes, the reason is there's tax and basically it's incentivized to put up car washes. The whole thing is considered a 15-year class life. So when bonus depreciation was 100%, so now 2025, I think we'll see more car washes again. Because they would spend 4 million, say, putting together a tunnel car wash, million for the land. They'd get a $3 million tax deduction in year one. They would just write the whole thing off. The whole thing would get depreciated. And so that's extraordinary. Gas stations are also extraordinary. They're all considered 15-year class life as well, as long as 50% of the sales is gasoline, which almost all of those are. So think like a 7-Eleven, right? Just along Woodruff Road, there's a 7-Eleven. I think it sold for about 6 million bucks, maybe 6.5 million. I think the land was two million, so it's 4.5 million. If bonus depreciation was 100%, they would get a $4.5 million tax deduction year one. So,
Somebody come to burn.
so it's kind of crazy. And then of course Airbnbs, right? So let's talk about Airbnbs for a second. I don't know if any of you guys even want to bother running an Airbnb, but there's the whole Airbnb tax loophole that people figured out with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So, if as long as you're running the Airbnb and you qualify for it based on the IRS rules, you can use the depreciation generated from your Airbnb to help offset your W-2 income. So it's a strategy we'll see a lot of times with big W-2 earners. They might go buy an Airbnb or buy a house and turn it into an Airbnb and take, 100, 200,000 in depreciation if it's an expensive building and use that to offset their W-2 income. And then in year two, they might decide, hey, I'm just going to flip it to a property management company. I got my depreciation, I'm going to continue to run it, but now it's going to become a passive investment for them rather than actively running it. But they were actively running it to get the depreciation deduction.
Which is such a genius way to do it. Somebody
Yeah.
spends the required hours to qualify, you know,
Yep.
they decide, hey, life circumstances change. Now I want to go have somebody else run this for me, and it can go be its own.
Let me give you one other tip. If you can use depreciation, if you can utilize what it is that we have, if you're buying a property late in the year, right? Let's say you're going to go buy a $350,000 rental house. The land is 50, the building is 300,000, and you buy it at some point in December. You're going to get a fraction, a tiny little bit of depreciation because you've only had it for 1 month in December. But if you can benefit from cost segregation, you could do a cost segregation study on that and take as much depreciation as is allowed for the whole year, right? Instead of just 1 month. So instead of getting, $500 or whatever it is on depreciation expense, you might end up getting, $60,000 in depreciation expense. So that's another strategy to pay attention to.
It's huge. In fact, I kind of did the same thing about 2 years ago. I bought about one of my four units about halfway through December. So,
Okay. Yep.
15 days worth of, straight
Yep.
said, we did sag on it, and I can't remember the numbers, but it was obviously very good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's another good strategy. So, it's kind of one of those things. A lot of people become aware of it. Not everyone's really used it yet, or they've heard things they're not quite sure. I just tell people, hey, you can always reach out to me, have a conversation. We'll run numbers for you. It's not going to cost you. Just get your head around it. It's better to have the PDF and the document, the estimate in your hand, rather than just being, kind of this theory of, oh, hey, I think I could do this or whatever. Let us put a document in your hand so you can see it and have a conversation with your tax advisor, see if it makes sense to do it or not. you know, we'd love to do it, but we're not gonna have you do something if it makes no sense for you to do it. So we want to be here for you long term as you guys are growing your properties and your investment portfolio to be a partner with you. And you just got somebody that you can bend his ear, say, hey, what do you think of this? Does this make sense to do this? What do these numbers look like?
Yeah, that's great. Randy, looks like we still got you on the call here with us. Wanted to ask you, are you full time in the business? Could you benefit from, a real estate professional status and kind of, shifting over some of your passive losses to your active income?
Um, I've done the professional real estate 2 years ago, and I'm carrying quite a bit because I retired this year. So
Good for you.
a lot of that is being carried over. So I'm good.
Awesome. Well, that's the way to do it. Have a good year. Get that appreciation and carry it forward.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, John, appreciate your time just jumping on here and talking with us today, sharing your.
Yeah, appreciate it, Hunter. Good conversation.
I say this every time we talk, John, but I always learn something new every single time. It's great.
Well, it's good. There's a lot to it. I mean, the thing is, you guys don't have to be the experts in it. Let our guys be the experts in it. You guys just need to know that you might benefit from it if you use it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well,
Hunter, would you mind sharing John's information?
sure, John. You just want to put it in the chat box, right?
Yeah, let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Let me put my glasses on.
Well, if not, I think I could probably just copy it over uh from your email.
Let's see. Here's my message
Mm.
there.
So John, I got a buddy who I helped him once upon a time buy a house maybe like 5, 6 years ago, and he left his tech job and he's working in private equity. They target mobile home parks.
Yeah.
So I'd like to chat with him. I like to check in on him here and there, because he just has a decent amount of business going. And I'm always hoping that I can, sell something for him. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I'd like to reach out to him with some value and say, hey, how's your cost seg team? Like, if you have one, have you done it before? You should talk to this guy
Right.
that, we just
Right.
had.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know if that guy even bothers to do cost seg or not. I don't know. It probably just depends on their, different funds that they might have or however they're structured. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that going on in private equity
Mhm.
right now. Those guys are gobbling up. So I mean, if you guys are looking for stuff to list, if you're real estate guys, you're looking to list stuff, those guys are evaluating all kinds of mobile home and RV parks.
I
Tons
see
of
you're
them.
with CSSI too, and
Yeah.
I've checked out a few of the blog articles, and I've seen
Okay.
it around in some of like the commercial newsletters. Yeah.
Yeah. So the company CSSI, we're based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, been around since 2003. We are owned by a private equity firm called Align Capital out of Dallas. They offer lots of different tax services. And then I have a blog I run called costSegBuilding.com where I try to educate real estate investors, commercial property owners, CPAs as well. They'll find my stuff to get answers to things. So I'm trying to provide more value add that way independently.
Hmm.
So that you guys know that.
I will definitely be subscribing.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. And I have a YouTube channel too. It's not as big as Hunter's, but my stuff is pretty esoteric, So, but happy to be a help, however you guys need it.
This is great. Yeah, John, again, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. And
Yeah, thank you.
please reach out to John if you have questions. He helps me personally on my stuff, and he helps Craig personally on his as well. So,
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Have a good one.
For joining.
Bye bye.